so Billy, we're here today on our first podcast. So our podcast is Complacency Kills, and there's going to be an entire theme of that throughout what we kind of talk about, everything from your day-to-day life to how, whether it's force protection or tactical training or anything like that, like that mindset goes through everything that we do here at Kontek and that the people we work with do. So today's episode is actually going to be about boxes that stop bullets, so BREs, which is one of our main things that we like to talk about and do here, and guard booths. So we have Billy on for the first time, as well as me. So Billy, tell us about yourself and how you got here, man.
Yeah, what's up, guys? Glad to be here today. Thanks for having me on today. My name is Billy Barton. I'm the National Sales Manager for Security and Defense here at Kontek. So I sell to federal government as well as some state stuff as well. I've worked in a lot of different industries in the past, everything from sales to technology. Also worked now for the past few years with one of our partner companies, Spec Train, doing firearms instruction and things like that. And so that's how I got kind of hooked up with Kontek, and I'm glad to be on board here now. And yeah.
Good, yeah. Yeah, so over here at Kontek, I handle a lot of the sales and marketing, and I kind of came to Kontek by chance as well. Have a background in military, worked in the defense surveillance space for quite a while, and that's actually how I met up with Kontek and found out we work in the same cities, different companies. So I came on board here and haven't looked back since. And what's so awesome, honestly, why I'm passionate about what we do is that there's so many applications from everyone from law enforcement all the way to military, DOD, and nuclear guys that at the end of the day, we're going to talk and discuss stuff that really just keeps people safe, right? And to run a more efficient security organization. So
100%.
So I mean, what we like to talk about, and one of the big things is just like the idea of force protection and what that means, right? So force protection is primarily it's used in the military space for having your defensive conditions set to a certain standard, just depending on what the current threat level is. And all that kind of came out of the Beirut bombing in '83 with the U.S. Marines out there that they weren't ready for an asymmetric style attack, and so this was done to address that, right? So everything from how you prepare, how you respond to that position, and ultimately, for guard booths, Overwatch towers, whatever the case may be, is to have that show of force and that ability to respond to an asymmetric attack like that, right? Wasn't very popular in '83, very popular now. So it's kind of an ever evolving topic, right? Is part of it, and part of what we're talking about with guard booths is how do you handle the VBID threat, right? So
yeah, it's ever changing, right? Always adapting to new circumstances, new threat levels. Whether it's 83, 9/11 is the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. Everything kind of just went up to a whole other level, after that happened. So it's a ever changing landscape for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and really at the end of the day, what they want to be able to do is to be able to interdict a potential a terrorist act when we're talking in these sense, right? So whether it's a military base or a nuclear power station, right, they all have the same mission, is to protect the people and assets and people inside of there from a kinetic base attack. There are different dedicated teams that deal with the whole cyber world. We're not smart enough for that, so we stick to steel, Kevlar, stuff like that. That's pretty grunt proof. So but along that lines is in the guard booth space, right? There's so many different options that you can go out there and kind of that you'll see stuff all the way from nice, beautiful brick entrances into military bases, all the way to essentially what a ticket teller might sit in at a movie theater, right? So there's a wide range, and I think what's important, and Billy can probably talk about this as well, is what's important is understanding what that group's mission is, right? Like, what's their intent, what's their purpose, why are they there, and why do they feel they need to protect themselves from whatever threat that might be, right?
Yeah, everybody can be different. Like you said, it's adaptable depending on the circumstance. Are they just looking for some kind of separation, some kind of delay barrier? Are they looking for something that's concealment? Are they looking for pure cover where we're trying to actually stop bullets and blasts and things of that nature? So it's different for every site, every group, every location for sure.
Yeah, so the whole reason that we're kind of doing this podcast is to get education and just have a good discussion on a lot of these things that we see on a day-to-day basis. And part of what we do is force protection, right? We provide and design and create stuff that helps, soldiers, Marines, security officers do their job better and stay safe or stay and go home. So, the big thing that we base around is the thought of force protection. And well, what is that, right? It's really just a set of measures that was put in after the Beirut bombings in '83 to really set a standard and guidelines to help the military combat asymmetric threats at static facilities and bases, right? So we've been kind of riding that bandwagon. There's a lot of follow through that you see on commercial nuclear security, Department of Energy security. A lot of these establishments are set up very, very akin to how the military deploys, perimeter-based security operations for facilities. So the guard booth is a great place to start. So that's kind of why we brought this all together. So on that piece is how are BREs, which, by the way, BRE is a blast and ballistic rated enclosure. That terminology is typically actually used in the nuclear and DOE space, while the typically for the military side, you'll see guard shack, guard booth. It may or may not be ballistically or blast rated. So there's that kind of slight differentiation. But yeah, for typical force protection operations, usually you will see a guard booth, right, deployed at an ECP or an entry control point or a VCP, a vehicle control point, really any area that they're going to have static operations and they're going to be going out and interdicting individuals, just dependent against their mission. So with that being said, there's really two ways you can look at it. You have your permanent operations and you have your temporary operations. And there's pros and cons of both in terms of what you need in equipment and how to best utilize it long term, right? So when we're talking about designing a booth and how we want it to work with our security operations, one of the first things that we're going to think about is ballistic levels. So ballistic levels, what's your threat? Is it a 44 Magnum? Is it 50 cal AP round or greater? Do you have an RPG threat? Do you have mortars, rockets, whatever the case is? All these things kind of have to be taken into account when you're deciding how you're going to protect your force. So Billy, like on the armor side, typically what do you usually see for ballistic ratings when it comes to small arms fire?
Yeah, so obviously, in this spaces, they have the NIJ and the UL 752 are kind of the two sets of standards that are being used pretty much universally, across the board. And there's all kinds of different threat levels that are listed in those standards, like you talked about, whether you just are trying to deal with like handgun rounds all the way up to 50 cal, AP for your ballistic standards. And it just depends on what your expected threat level is, as well as, there's pros and cons to the different ones as far as, the more protected you are, the heavier it is, right? Yep. So for personal body armor, you're not going to want to wear 50 cal AP plates around, right? Because you're going to be able to move and fight and walk. So you have to just kind of figure out where's that balance based upon kind of, what your mission is and what your expected threat level is, and choose one that's best for you.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and actually a good point when I got right here. So like this right here is an example, you can see on the camera. This is a good example of 50 cal AP armor that would be used on a ballistic building, a BRE or a guard booth, right? But exactly to Billy's point is that weight, size, all that is a big factor, So if you're trying to build something that's going to be used in a temporary fashion, that you quickly need to pick up and redeploy in a matter of minutes, 50 cal AP might be difficult to arrange, right? So there are temporary solutions out there that are mobile and temporary, but if you're looking, for something that's quick, high speed, rapidly deployable in minutes, 50 cal AP may not be the best choice for you, right? So, and there's a bunch of different ways to work around that, but exactly, when you're planning for your mission, you have to have all those kind of things into account. And something that's really interesting, and I talked about this before in a minute with Kontek about ballistic glasses. What's really interesting, and you having your shooting background and understanding how people actually engage targets in real life, is that I always find interesting, and so do the customers that we work with, is how like the NIJ standard and the EL 752 don't necessarily show a realistic perspective of a target engagement, right? So like a single shot of 30 cal AP or stuff like that. So
hard to predict, right? You know, even if you have an idea of your threat levels as far as like what caliber or types of weapons you're likely to encounter, it's impossible to predict how many hits you need to protect, how close together are those hits going to be. You know, it's really tough to figure that out. Yeah. But you're right, like a lot of the standards say, hey, you know, this will protect you against one hit of this or whatever, may not be realistic as far as, you know, life-saving materials for an actual gunfight. And so definitely a lot to consider there.
Oh yeah, for sure. And with that, you know, something that I always tell my clients is it never hurts to ask the manufacturer, the rep that's selling you anything from body armor all the way to a ballistic rated building, right? Is yes, you say, you know, you have the lab certification that's NIJ4 or whatever, you know, it's rated for. But a lot of times they'll do testing, whether in the lab or outside the lab, to really see like what the breaking point, what the threshold is of that particular material or product, right? So it never hurts to ask. Yes, they'll say it's an NJ4, but hopefully you get some other more real-world test results that convey more of a realistic scenario. So we just always like to pass along and keep in mind. 50 cal AP rated glass. And what their question was is, on paper, this is rated for one shot of 50 cal AP. But what they were asking is, okay, if I don't have the 50 cal AP is my threat, but I'm running with 5.56, whatever the case is, how many shots can I absorb that with 5.56? And a lab test coming from a factory is not going to have that, right? So you want to get with manufacturers that have tested it themselves or sent it out on their own accord to go out to a lab and actually have that verified. You know, come to find out, we tested it. Don't quote me to this, but I want to say we had well over 55 rounds shot through without any penetration. Right, so there's all those kind of things that you try to bring it into the real world for these guys. So always good point to have. But yeah, you know, and I've spent a lot of time in these. I don't know about you, Billy, but you know, one of the things I want to talk about at least today was what's important in a guard booth and BRE, right? Like usually people in there spending a lot of time, in there, very sedentary usually.
Yeah.
But the first thing that we really want to kick off with, and we've already kind of beat on this a little bit already, is having the first and foremost is there to protect you, right? So keeping it designed around the threat for your area, right? And that could be blast, that could be ballistic, also weather, right? So some stuff that I think we often gets overlooked is, you know, what kind of weather wind ratings do these things have, seismic ratings, especially for if guard booth's put up on a tower, right? You don't want to come crashing down. So those are all things you want to keep in mind when you're kind of assessing what guard booth would meet your needs. So, and we passed over this a little bit earlier, but on the blast side, right? So especially for military operations, having a blast rated booth can definitely save lives, right? There's plenty of instances where, you know, people, if they had a blast booth, it could have ended differently, right? So I think we're starting to get there on the military side, but it's definitely something that's like at the forefront for like DOE and commercial nuclear stations. All that stuff is, you know, highly blast rated for that specific threat. So, Billy, on this, and from the shooting background, you know, something that I find important, right, is when you're not only deciding what kind of guard booth where you're going to put it, but understanding your threat, what avenues and approaches the threat have, and understanding your fields of fire that you're capable of while protected in that guard booth. So I've seen some really cool stuff at your courses, and you know, we can hop into it here a little bit, is, you know, some common misconceptions, you know, whether you're fighting from a defensive position inside of a guard booth, maybe you're outside of that guard booth and you're egressing back into that guard booth to continue the fight. The common misconception of depth and angle when using you know, an object, in this case steel armor, for cover, right?
Yeah, well, lot of variables there, right? And so obviously you have the idea of, you know, hey, if we're in a guard booth and are protected from the outside, that's great, but how am I actually going to now deal with the threat from inside of this box, right? And so you have to be able to return fire and actually engage without opening yourself up, hopefully to minimal exposure from whatever that threat is on the outside. And so obviously we have some really cool options for that as far as gun ports, things of that nature, like the GP3 that we have pictured here, that allows you to really from complete and total protection be very effective at returning fire at various distances and angles, and be able to move it around even inside the space, and it just give you a lot of flexibility to be able to do a lot of work while still being really well protected, which is obviously crucial.
Oh yeah, and something from one of your courses that you guys talked about is the common feel and need to be like, if this is my wall, this is my armor, I want to be as close up to it to be able to engage and return fire out of my port or from outside of the building, right? And I'm using it to engage. But often, the natural aspect of like geometry and actually having that standoff from whatever your protection is to create that angle to allow you to shoot and have the most coverage, I think is something that's often overlooked, but an awesome part of training that, in my opinion, takes like constant repetition to beat that into your brain. Because the natural instinct is get close to cover.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely, right. Yeah. And of course, there's tons of variables there, and shooting from behind cover inside of a guard booth is a lot different than from behind a car or whatever the case may be. And so there's tons of variables there depending on the environment that you want to kind of be familiar with, and like you said, have actually practiced and repped out before getting into your a real world engagement there. But definitely, there's a lot of stuff. We even see a lot in our courses, even among military and law enforcement guys, like it's stuff that clearly came from watching movies and Hollywood and stuff. Like that has no place, in the real world. And so actually, getting some training, in that regard can be crucial and really sets you up for success for the real world, whatever situation you find yourself in.
Yeah, absolutely. No, those are all important, and what's so funny is that before we move on here is that, like, when you think of a guard booth, it's for lack of a better way, it's a box that stops bullets, right?
Yeah.
But having training that goes along with that to best utilize your angles, best utilize your viewports, your weapons ports, whatever's at your disposal in there, there's always a better way to do it. And I would say guard booths is probably towards the bottom of people think of a better way how to fight from a guard booth. But definitely for like overseas operations and stuff that the State Department's doing, and all that kind of those high threat areas, definitely something that I think we can continue to work on and grow for sure. Most importantly, from my point of view, and everyone that uses it, is the creature comforts. It's guys spend a lot of time in there, 12 hours plus easily in a single shift. So stuff just like basics, have good flooring, good electrical systems, and like HVAC, right? So you have good, clean, consistent temperature in there. Obviously overseas, OCONUS type stuff, you may not always have those luxuries, but wherever you have the infrastructure to support that, definitely do it. Another thing is staying organized in there, right? So there's a lot of low cost but effective organization pieces out there, everything from steel molly cages where you can go and have all your kit ready to rock and roll up there, tack tote gear, which all fits magnetically against the structure, right? So, and I know this guy knows a lot more about cool gear I hadn't even heard of before. So, yeah.
But yeah, no, it's super important. Like you said, obviously, a lot of the places where guys are spending a lot of time in his booth, you really are expecting to hopefully never have to use, the booth for what it's intended for, as well as the gear that's in it. But in the event that you do, you need to know where the gear that you need is at and be able to access it quickly and put it in and deploy it in a rapid fashion. So having everything in a very designated place where you know where it's at and you can get it, access it quickly is super important, for sure.
Without a doubt. And on there is, at the end of the day, what you want when you combine all those things is good creature comfort to keep your morale good, right? Have the ability to have stuff quickly organized, so you can access it and maintain what your mission is. Because in my experience is when stuff actually does happen, especially when you least expect it, all your fine motor skills go to crap, right? So it's path of least resistance, point A to point B and get in the fight. So what all this comes up to and combines to, though, is what you want is high survivability, right, for the guys in there that are fighting. And you also want to increase your lethality on your combatants. So stuff like the GP3, which is a great example of Billy brought up, right? All these things combined with surveillance systems, early detection, anything that you can do that you can incorporate into your guard booth, whether it's LRAD, whether it's surveillance systems, lighting systems, all these things combined allow you to detect early. The guard booth is there for you to ultimately delay, and if it comes to defending, and you get through that entire process, and come out victorious, right, at whatever engagement you're in. So I guess one of the big things that we do here, and honestly a lot of the market does, is the prefabricated and modular style of building, right? There's a bunch of benefits to it. Probably the biggest one is the fact that you can get that unit into operation quicker. It's easier to build, and it's easier to deliver, and it's easier to install. And down the road, as you make modifications, upgrades, the fact that you're modular gives you the ability to swap out gun ports, swap out windows. A lot of these small things over time, right, that you may want to mod in the field, right? I think another great example would be on the optics side of the house, right? You swap out optics, that can have a huge impact on what your gun ports and how they're designed and what you want them to do, just strictly based off of whether you're running thermals or EOTechs. Right.
Yeah, same thing with the gun ports, the balls in there, like if you're running a suppressor, you're going to need a different setup versus if you're just running, kind of straight bird cage. So, yeah, having the ability to quickly and easily, change those things out without having to completely, redesign, rebuild the structure, is really, really helpful.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things that we try to focus on, at least for our kit, is it's modular in the fact that you're not going to go out there, you're not going to be cutting, you're not going to be welding, you're not going to be painting, you're not going to be doing all those things that you typically would have to do a pretty big overhaul on the tactical side of the house. So, and also long-term maintenance and support, right? So if you're going out and you have a custom build of particular guard booths and stuff like that, it does make long-term part support, maintenance support more difficult than having an off-the-shelf modular design that fits your needs. And that's the biggest thing. The last thing on it really is that it's mission adaptable, right? So the fact that it's mission adaptable is that I can take my modular booth that was designed to be used in a temporary fashion at an ECP for a few months. Once that mission wraps up, because of the modular design, that allows that end user to take it and convert it into a permanent solution with really no major field modifications. And so that's one of the big things for long-term support of that system. Being modular gives you the flexibility and it gives you the support from the manufacturer, especially on the upgrade side. So, without a doubt. And then kind of the last thing is, well, there's a lot of pros and cons, right, to mobile versus a permanent setup. I think what's kind of important to distinguish is that because you have a modular build, permanent is maybe not the best word, right? Because for examples of modular builds that we've done in the past, they go on modular above grade foundations. It goes on a modular tower system that goes all the way up to a modular BRE on the top. If that mission changes and they no longer need a tower elevated BRE and they want to trailer mount that BRE on top, they're able to take the foundation away, take the tower away, take the actual BRE and do a custom retrofit onto a trailer and have the ability to have a mobile BRE. So there's a lot of pros and cons. I'll say the biggest one that stands out to me is once you start getting, the more mobile you get, the less blast resistance I've typically seen that you have the ability to bring to the table, right? When you're not tied down to a permanent structure or to a above grade modular foundation or something like that, it adds a big effect to it. So outside of that, you got anything else, Billy?
No, that's great point that you bring up there with the ability to be mobile is really increases our ability to bring some real protection to places where it hasn't been able to be before. A lot of times the kind of protection we get from this kind of guard booth was just restricted for those permanent locations, whether it's like you said, a nuclear power plant or a permanent military installation. But now we can relocate those things too, whether it's a forward operating base overseas or a temporary high threat event, even stateside, whatever the case may be. we're able to really locate some real protection and in a sense some force multiplication there as well, to those kind of temporary locations, which is something that's really cool to have in the arsenal.
Oh yeah, for sure. And one of the things I kind of want to wrap up on this whole conversation, and something that applies both mobile and permanent, is having the engineering behind what you want to accomplish for ballistic, for blast, for weather, for load bearing, stuff like that. The reason I bring that up, right, is like overseas typically they use HESCO barriers, right? So a barrier, they'll create a booth around it. If they want mortar or rocket protection, they'll lay wood and beams down and put HESCOs on top of that. And unfortunately we had Marines killed from just HESCOs collapsing, on their shelter, right? So it's like one of those things where solutions like a modular, engineered, designed specifically for stopping, small arms to vehicle blast, right, and even upgrading, right, to things in the guard booth space to defend against mortar attacks and rocket attacks and all that kind of stuff. I think it's important that we continue as a community, right, to in the DoD, especially in the DoD community, right, is taking a look at some of those things that we can do better at, right? So, but yeah, this is our first podcast. I can't say it was flawless, but we tried to fight our way through it, so it's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so every month we'll be getting together like this. We'll have a topic. We'll be issuing it out. You'll be able to find it on all your major podcast channels, as well as on video on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, all those great places. But we look forward to doing this more.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Yep. So good stuff. And we will see you next month, which will be June. We'll see you in June. All right. Bye, guys.